45 I bought was Van Halen Jump. I wanted to buy the LP, but my mom wouldn't allow it because it had an angel smoking a cigarette on it.
Hi, I'm Uli John Roth, and you're watching the All Over the Place podcast where the fun sanity never ends.
Hello and welcome back to All Over the Place, the official podcast of Media Pub Live. I'm your host, Eric Porvoznik. And as always, folks, we cannot thank you enough for subscribing, watching, liking, sharing, all that good stuff. Continuing to grow week in and week out. We have no one to thank but you for that. And I'm going to point this, even though it's not polite, but thank you so much. And please keep that up. We're bringing more great guests to you, including the one we've got today. But first off, I've got to bring in my man, Jim Culver here. How you doing, Jim?
I'm good. How are you this morning?
Well, you know, we've got a guest from a particular part of the world where I've got to up my liquor game today. So it's early in the morning with an Irish coffee here, a little bullet whiskey in my Coca-Cola today. So in a good mood, very good mood. And unfortunately, Marty's feeling under the weather today, so he's not with us. But here in spirit, and we'll get to that a little bit later as to exactly why, because we've got a phenomenal guitarist, musician. He's a one-man wrecking crew, and he has been called the meanest guitar player in Canada. I can't imagine anybody in Canada being mean, but I'm just going with what the press is telling me. Please welcome to All Over the Place, Steve Hill. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's good to be with you guys.
So yeah, I read meanest guitar player in Canada. I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. It's a bit of an oxymoron, but you know, you got to go with what the press says, right?
Well, if you know, it's just it's one guy's opinion. So.
That's right. So, and you're right now. You're promoting your album, an amazing blues album, "Hanging on a String," which has been called the must-have, must-own blues album of the year. Tell us how this masterpiece came to be.
Well, it was recorded at Studio 6 in Los Angeles. That's Dave Grohl's studio, and it just happened that it's just it's who you know. So. I was hired years ago by a microphone company based in San Jose called Loudon Audio. And I was hired to do the NAMM show and Sweetwater and a few events like that. And I was not the star of those events. The star was Darrell Thorp. Darrell Thorp is a 10-time Grammy winner, engineer of the year. And he does the Foo Fighters records, but he's also done Paul McCartney, Radiohead, Beck, Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, Reba McEntire. He does everything. And so we did these events like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. And Brian, the owner of the company, would sometimes tell me, hey, Steve, you got to come and record an album in California. But I live pretty far from California, and I'm a self-produced artist. Right now I'm in my home studio. I usually do albums myself. I'm a one-man band and I record myself, and sometimes I even mix the albums myself. And so going to California to record an album, it seemed like a bit unreal to me, but Brian got tired of waiting, and he decided to book Studio 606 and to book Darrell for me to record an album, and that was almost 2 years ago, and that gave me like 3 months to write songs and to learn how to perform them, because I performed them live in the studio. And as I said, I'm a one-man band, so I play drums, guitar, and I modify my guitar so that I play bass at the same time, and I sing. And so the guys wanted me to record the album live, and after 3 months I was ready, so I went to California, and I landed, and after 15 minutes, I got into a car accident. I was just the passenger, but somebody ran on a red light, and I got broken ribs. And I tried to record the album, but the producers decided to postpone the recording, which was a good thing because it gave me 3 extra months to get ready. And I went back in January, and I had 6 days to record the album, and I recorded it in 5. It's all first, second, or third takes. It's very raw. You said it's a blues album. I don't really consider it a blues album. I mean, the blues press consider it a rock record, and the hard rock press consider it a blues record. I guess I'm right there in the middle.
Rock and roll is rock and roll. It's got that blues bass, but absolutely, yeah. And what I love about it is, however accidentally it came to be, it's a loose concept album about, you know, this dystopian world where music brings us together. And as you can see here, folks, same thing with Steve and his background. And as you know from watching all over the place or listening, music is what gets me moving. It pulses through my veins constantly. And however loose of a concept album, I mean, how did you shape the album into being what it is, hanging on a string?
Well, it just started here in my recording studio, and I just jam. You know, I play for 45 minutes and then listen to it and take notes. So I did that for a few weeks, and then it didn't take long for songs to come out of that. And some of the songs were longer, took longer to do, and they kept evolving over a 6-month period. Um, but you know, after like I'd say 3 months, I had most of the songs that are on the album. Of course, I did more songs than what's on the album. Usually, when you do a record, you'll have twice as many songs. I didn't have that that long to write the songs on the album, but I had a bunch of ideas and I'd send it to the producer, and he was like, "Okay, this is great. This I'm not too crazy about." So it was fun for me to have somebody to work with, you know, like as I mentioned earlier, I usually do everything myself, and so it was great to have a producer on this one. And I got a friend of mine also, Johnny Pilgrim. He's a Canadian who he's been in LA for like 40 years, and we write lyrics together. So we got together, and I had basic lyrics for the songs, but he helped me to finish them. He wrote, actually, I think he wrote most of the lyrics, but usually starting from ideas that I had, but some of them were really his own ideas, like Maggie. And I had this other song where he made it really personal about me. And I thought I wanted to do like, I wanted to approach like universal themes. I didn't want it to be too personal, but with the help from Johnny, it became like universal, but also very personal. There's a song called "Show Ya," which is basically my life story. You know, I started playing air guitar, and then at 13 I started playing. At 16 I was playing clubs. I signed a bad record deal, and many years later I'm touring in a beat up car. So so that's the song. And there's a lot of songs about music and about performing music. Brian had this great idea for me to record "When the Music's Over," the Doors' "When the Music's Over," and I've been a fan since I was a teenager, and it just felt natural. And adding that song sort of made it a concept album. Sometimes, you know, like you do all these songs separately, but when you put them together in a certain order, there seems to be a story there. There seems to be a theme, and I try to do that with every record. Sometimes it's harder to do. With this one, it all came really naturally.
And you mentioned the personal, of course, and I brought up Marty, co-host, earlier, and this is I'm glad you brought up "Show Ya," because that song there aren't enough O's in groove to talk about that one. And it's got, you mentioned Van Halen. Marty and I, huge Van Halen fans. You're going to get my large noggin out of the way. Jim's a fan as well, but there's my little mini Frankenstrat there. Big Van Halen fan.
Right. I have one there too.
Oh, yes. You belong. Where have you been?
Like the 78
Chip and Renee over at
the
Chips for PR. Awesome. I'm so glad you're here, fellow Van Halen nuts. So I was wondering just how autobiographical is that song, because that song does have a good Top Jimmy feel to it, just the way it grooves all throughout. So it's good to know it's an autobiographical song. Dig it.
Yeah. Well, I'm I'm a fan of guitar music in general. I thought it was a cool idea to have Van Halen mentioned in there. At first, it was just the line you're talking about. It's like, how does it go? I heard my first Van Halen record when I was 6 years old. The original line was, "I heard my first loud guitar when I was 6 years old." and then I tried to fit Kiss in there, and Johnny's not a Kiss fan, so he wasn't for it. And then I tried to fit AC/DC in there, and it was a bit too long. And I was listening to Van Halen at the time, and I just tried that, and it seemed to fit. But I think the first 45 I bought was Van Halen Jump. I wanted to buy the LP, but my mom wouldn't allow it because it had an angel smoking a cigarette on it. So I bought the 45 instead.
Yeah, I got it. As has been mentioned on a previous show, I have a Catholic mother and a Methodist father, so I was allowed to get that album the day it came out in 1984. So yes, the good balance that I had with that one. You mentioned like the blues people call it a rock record, the rock people call it a blues record, but you're a guy who has played all different kinds of styles, whether it's country or metal or jazz or everything through the years. Just what inspires you now, where you're just this one man band?
Well, I still listen to a lot of music. Just this morning, I was listening to Lonnie Mack, and then Ronnie Wood, and like I love all types of music. I'm mostly into music from the '60s and '70s, early '80s. I like the '50s. I got into blues at a pretty early age. I bought Robert Johnson, King of the Delta Blues Singers, when I was 15, and I think I bought my first Muddy Waters tape with my newspaper route money when I was 14 or 13. So because I was into Clapton and Zeppelin and Hendrix, that's what really got me into playing music. Before that, I played piano a little bit for a year or two, and I was into prog rock. I was not really into the music that was happening when I started playing guitar in 1987, and I was not into hard rock at the time, and I was not into pop. I was into prog rock and Cream, Hendrix, and Zeppelin. And a friend of mine had his big brother's record collection, and we really got into that. All these old LPs, and lately I was listening to a lot of Pink Floyd, and I still have my LPs that I bought when I was like 11 from Sam the Record Man, which was the big record store in Canada back in the day. And so I'm still into the older music, but through the years I got into jazz, I got into country, I got into hard rock, I got into a bunch of different styles. The more you listen to music, the more you realize that there's new stuff to discover. Even if you're listening to mostly older stuff, there's always something. And I buy a lot of LPs, and I listen to music every day, so I'm influenced by all of that. But when I became a one-man band, that was about 12 or 13 years ago, and I couldn't do like everything that I wanted to do because there's limitations there. You can't do. I have to play the bass line at the same time as I'm playing lead, and so chord wise, there's it's you can't do everything. Luke. I can do much more on the guitar if I'm just playing the guitar, but at the same time, it helped me to find a sound, and I think that yeah, by being a one man band, it kept me focused on that one sound. It was bluesier when I started the one man band because I couldn't do rock and roll. When I started, it was just bass drum, guitar, vocals, and then I added a hi-hat, and you can't really do rock and roll with that. Over the years, I added a snare drum, and then I thought about having a drumstick on my guitar's headstock to hit the cymbal and the hi-hat, and I found a way to play bass and guitar at the same time on the same instrument. And so over the years, the sound of the one man band became more rock and roll. I put out the first album I put out like that as a one man band was Solo Recordings Volume 1. That was in 2012, and that was really a blues album. It won Blues Album of the Year or a self-produced CD at the Memphis International Blues Challenge. Got a Juno nomination in Canada. That's the Canadian Grammy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did Solo Recordings Volume 2. This one won the Juno, won a bunch of Maple Blues awards, and then I did solo recordings, Volume 3, which was a bit more rock and roll. Now I could finally rock with the one man band, so it was like venturing away from the blues of Volume 1 and Volume 2, and then I did an acoustic album during the pandemic. I did a band record a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, and this album, Brian, the producer, really wanted the one man band, and I had been I had been playing with a band for a while, for about a year or two, and so I got back into the one man band, and I had a pretty clear idea of what I wanted to do, which is basically what I've been wanting to do since 2018. But I couldn't perform it. I had reached a plateau, and I couldn't get further, and it took a lot of practicing. It took long days in the studio here in my home studio to get ready to go record there. But I finally was able to get the sound that I was looking for, which was more rock and roll, but still having those blues roots, but very raw, very rocking. And then Darrell Thorp, the engineer producer of the album, really he captured that on tape in a way that not a lot of people could do. And it sounds like a band. It doesn't sound like one guy, and that's the cool thing about it.
Absolutely. And tell us more about that recording at Studio 606, because Dave Grohl, renowned for, keeping things analog in this digital age. So what was that like for you? And tell us about recording a one-man band in such an awesome analog space.
Well, the thing about Studio 606 is you may have seen his documentary, Sound City.
Yes.
When Sound City closed, he bought that board, that classic Neve board, where on which he had recorded Nirvana's Nevermind, and I think Appetite for Destruction was done on that. Fleetwood Mac, the first couple of Tom Petty records. So many classic albums have been recorded on that board, and then it was recorded to tape on a 24-track Studer. That board is very particular. There's not a lot of big Neve boards like that around with the classic 1073 preamps. But this one had been designed, or it came with specifications that Keith Olsen, the guy who ran Sound City, wanted. So it's a bit different from all the other Neve boards. And recording on tape is something that I had done in the past, and I have tape machines here in the studio, but I would need an engineer here at all times if I was going to record on tape. So I usually record to Pro Tools, but I really prefer the sound of tape. To me, it can't be beat, And they had this really great 24-track Studer over there, and Darrell really knows his way around the studio. So like all the effects that you hear on the album, you can hear phasing and tape effects that he's doing with the tape. Like there's a track called World Gone Insane, and it ends with a minute and a half of noises, and it's all him working the tape machine, slowing it down, having like two tape machines playing, and one of them slowing down, and all the effects that we hear have been invented in the 60s using tape machines, like phasing, tape echo, flanger, all of that. It's all tape based, and now you just have a plug-in, or it's right there in the computer, but it's never the same. Like I'm into vintage amps, also vintage guitars, and they make great amps and great guitars now, don't get me wrong, but personally I prefer Fender amps from the 50s and the Marshalls from the 60s, and it's the same
Tube
thing
amps. Yes, absolutely.
And it's the same thing in recording gear, like so to be able to record on that great sounding recording gear in that great room, and I had as far as amps go, I didn't bring any. I was using the Foo Fighters amps, so they have about 50 amps in the place, and about 50 drum kits. So I had one of Dave Grohl's bass drum their drums basically, and their amps. I used an old Vox from the '60s, which is one of Chris Shiflett's amps, and an old Fender Princeton from the '60s until I blew up the amp and then replaced it with another one of his amps. I don't think he's aware that I blew up his amp because it got repaired. but he's got a great amp collection, and I was glad to be able to use those. Very happy with the guitar sound on the album, and that says
Absolutely.
there's the amps, there's the playing, but there's also Darrell, who really knows what he's doing, and Oliver Roman, also the engineer on the album, who's a killer engineer.
Well, that had to have been a hell of a backline, no doubt. Working with all that. And folks, I want to remind you that you're on the All Over the Place podcast, whether you're watching or listening. And we're on right now with Steve Hill. And I want to remind everybody, scrolling across there on the bottom, Steve's got some tours coming up all across Canada. One or two more this year on the schedule. You can check out over at his site, stevehillmusic.com/shows. And also make sure you check out his the new album, Hanging on a String, back catalog as well over there at the website. And Steve, I also noticed over there you've got one of your past albums, Dear Illusion. You got a Dear Illusion hot sauce.
I had
not for nothing,
It's
look,
sold out.
I used to live in the Great Lakes. I visited Canada quite a bit. I'm a little leery, a Canadian peddling some hot sauce. Is it going to burn our mouths? Tell us about it.
Hot sauce, I mean, it's not only popular in the States. People love hot sauce everywhere. And there's this a friend of mine's got a hot sauce company in Quebec, and we did a partnership together, but it sold out. There was also a comic book with Dear Illusion that's available on the website if you're into comic books. I'm a comic book collector, so like the guy who's done the album cover for Hanging on a String has also done the two albums before that, Dear Illusion and Desert Trip, and he's a comic book artist called Rob Cannon. And so the hot sauce was just an idea like that, because I'm into hot sauce, so I figured why not.
Love it. I'm sure Jim's going to be picking up that comic book now.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Awesome.
And as a drummer, I have to ask about the drumstick fused to your guitar. Well, what was the inspiration for that, and what are some of the technical limitations you ran into from that?
Well, like I as I mentioned, it's when I started the one-man band, it was just bass drum. Actually, when I started, I would just foot stomp and put a mic on the floor. And there's a couple of songs like that on Solo Recordings Volume 1. And then a friend of mine sold me a bass drum, and I did a few songs with just the bass drum, guitar, and vocals. And then I figured I got this other leg, I might as well use it. So I got a hi-hat. And then I wanted a snare, so I found a way to have a bass drum pedal on the snare. And I've always played standing up, and when I started the one-man band, it was just one foot, just playing the bass drum. So I was standing up, and then I did that for a while, and then I got the hi-hat, and it seemed harder for me to try to do it sitting down, so I kept doing it standing up, and then I got the snare. So basically, when I'm playing, I got the left foot on the bass drum pedal, and I got a bass drum pedal for the snare, and the right foot is on it. And I'm standing up, and I got this. Let me show you how I do it. So there's this thing. You can just put the drumstick in there. And it took a while to get there, and a few experiments. And at first it was, I only had a cymbal, and it took a while to, I wouldn't say master, but it took a while to be able to play it. And that was about 10 years ago. On Volume 2, that's when I started having the cymbal there. And then I figured, like I'll have a hi-hat there so I can do like real rock beats, real drum beats with the hi-hat. And kick and snare, and then it was just a matter of rehearsing. And I do a lot of shows. A bit less since the pandemic, but before the pandemic, I was doing 125, 150 shows a year. So by playing constantly, you figure out a way to do it. And there's also a maraca on the drumstick, so there's that going on. Uh, to give more subdivisions, time subdivisions. So and it's just the more you do it, it's the same thing as playing the guitar. The more you play the guitar, the better you're going to get at it. The one man band to me is like it's not playing guitar. It's a whole different instrument, and it's not playing drums. It's not real drums. I can't play real drums. But after doing this for 12 or 13 years or whatever, I can I can do that, and I really enjoy it. I still enjoy it a lot. I love playing with a band, but the one man band is something very special, and it takes a lot of energy, a lot of focus, and it's like a mix between music and sports.
Well, as a rock fan, I think that was a brilliant move. But as a drummer, I hope the idea doesn't catch on, because we need people to think we're irreplaceable.
Well, Jim, I almost wore my Nigel Tufnell shirt today for a little Spinal Tap action there for you, but actually instead I went with my Dirty Knobs, my Mike Campbell shirt, and a great live show I caught earlier this year in Detroit. And he's keeping rock and roll spirit alive with a little bit of a blues. You're doing that. So where do you see the rock and roll world going, or even just maintaining itself in a world that just, I don't think, values rock and roll as much as it used to?
Yeah, well, it certainly is not what it used to be. When I was younger, rock and roll was the big thing. Now it's a niche thing. Just like jazz, basically. But jazz is still around. Jazz used to be on the charts. It used to be on the radio, just like rock and roll used to be on the charts, and it used to be on the radio. It's probably not going to happen anymore. But sometimes, there's a jazzier album that people like Dinah Krall had a lot of success. I don't know, 20 years ago, and rock and roll comes. Sometimes it comes back, So for the past 20 or 25 years, like we've seen a lot of, rock and roll is coming back. Rock and roll is back, and it's never going to be as big as it used to be. But there's still people who wanna listen to rock and roll, and there's still musicians who want to play rock and roll. And I think that a lot of kids, picking up the guitar. There's a lot of girls picking up the guitar. Really, really great young female guitar players that I see on Instagram. And there's Grace Potter. She's everywhere. She's 18 and she's rocking. And she's done the Tonight Show. She's done you can see her everywhere. And she's become a star. And she's not even a singer. She's a guitar player. But there's something really cool about that, younger female guitar players, which is not something that you used to see. There was Lita Ford, there weren't that many female guitar players, and there's a lot of really great female guitar players that I've been seeing lately. So that's going to inspire more people to pick up the guitar, and you never know. Maybe 5 years from now, the number one album on the Billboard might be a rock and roll record. It's going to be different. Each generation that picks up the instrument approaches it in a different way. But I know that they've been selling more guitars than ever during the pandemic. And so there's a lot of people still interested in that. And classic rock bands are still touring and selling out arenas. And so and Taylor Swift picks up a guitar now and then, and so I don't think it's over for rock and roll. I mean, people have been saying that rock is dead for a long time, and I don't think it's dead. It's never going to be the big thing again. I don't think it will. I would really like that, but I don't think it'll happen. But who knows? At some point, people might be like really, really, really bored with hip hop um, and move to rock and roll. And you know, like country is really big these days, and a lot of it is '80s rock or '80s power pop, power ballads, power rock ballads with a twist, with a twang on the and an accent on a southern accent on the vocal, but and a lot of auto tune, uh, but
Oh,
but rock and roll is still
Sad
there.
but
You know,
true.
like you listen to some of that stuff, and it's rock and roll guitar. It's not country guitar. You know, so there will always be, well, not always. You never know, but I think it'll be around for a while, for a long time.
God,
and
I
and
hope so. I don't
and
know.
you know, every year there's a new Beatles thing coming out, and more people discovering the Beatles, and you know, 60 years ago they did the Ed Sullivan Show, and there's a show on Disney about that now, right now, 60 years later. Who would have thought? So
Well,
I think
I'm looking at this right here is my album of the year, the Black Crows. This album
I
kicks.
saw that show in Montreal
Oh
in April. It
man,
was great.
Nice.
this is kicking ass like it's the '90s, which in the case of the Black Crows, they were playing a sound from the '60s in the '90s, and it's
Yeah,
so good. This album's so amazing. So yeah, as long as Chris and Rich can keep things together, not fight with each other to the point of breaking up again. But yeah, and like I said, the Mike Campbell album, Iron Maiden, and there's young kids at all these shows still. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm with you that I think that it's just this lumbering beast that's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to be on the top of the charts unless Taylor Swift or Beyonce make a rock and roll album instead of country album. But yeah, it's can't
That
go.
might happen. You know.
As my boys Angus and company say, Brian, it ain't noise pollution, and and they're coming back for a
Yeah,
tour. Not just
yeah.
ACDC's not going anywhere. It's like, yep, the lumbering beast that will not die. And yeah, going back to what you said with Darrell and the effects that he was doing in the studios, and I'll bring up Mike Campbell's old band Tom Petty. I love that in the studio feel. I specifically want to mention When the Music's Over, because it's got a really cool Hendrix vibe at the start with all those different effects going on. Is that something that Darrell brought to the game, and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
how did
That's
you incorporate that?
I have nothing to do with that. Uh, uh, like
But you played it oh so well.
I did two takes, and that was it. You know, and then I got out of the studio, and basically, like I did the album in 5 days, and we'd do two songs a day. I'd do like 2 or 3 takes, and then I'd let them figure out which take was the best one. Sometimes they'd take like the intro to one take, and the rest of another take, that we call that doing a comp. And they do that, and then I get in the studio and do the vocal. I do 2 or 3 takes of the vocal. They do a comp, and that's it. And all these effects, you know, like the beginning of When the Music's Over, or the ending of World Gone Insane. I was not there when Darrell did that. I was hanging out in the lounge, you know, and then they'd call me, "Hey, Steve, could I come and listen to that?" And it had been done, you know, and I was blown away by that. I've always loved that type of tape effects, tape manipulation. The intro to When the Music's Over, that's backwards tape, and backward. The first time that was done was, I think it was on Rubber Soul, the Beatles' Rubber Soul, and then Hendrix took that to another level with backwards guitars and all that, and backwards drums. You hear that a lot also, like on Are You Experienced? That's backwards drums, but that whole intro is backwards tape, and you hear backwards vocals, backwards guitars, and it's very, very cool. So I'm glad that he was there to do that, and that he was willing to try things like that, you know. because it was not discussed before. We didn't say, okay, we should really do like weird tape effects, or he just did it right on the spot.
I'm digging that. And I love hearing that it's one or two takes, because that to me, rock and roll isn't about perfection. I mean, I real
No.
look that some people for me, rock and roll is raw. It's about making mistakes from time
Well,
to time and don't put you through
perfection,
it.
or trying to reach perfection is what killed rock and roll. Because at some point, like 20 years ago, everything had to sound the same. Everything had to be copied on Nickelback, and everything had to have the same production because that's what rock and roll radio was asking for. So everything started sounding the same, and it was all put on the grid in the machine, making it sound perfect, and it killed rock and roll. The great rock and roll is not is very far from perfection, and that's a big part of the excitement. If you put everything on the grid, and you're trying to get everything on the click track and all that, it usually kills the vibe. If you listen to the Rolling Stones, they speed up, and it's part of the groove, it's part of the feel, and it's part of the excitement that comes that gets you when you listen to it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Darrell kept that. There might have been a few tweaks in there, but it's not overly worked on. It's still pretty raw, and he really went for the performances. Usually when I produce myself, I do way too many takes, and then I finish a song and I completely redo it, and it's a process that can go on for months, if not years. And in the end, the vibe gets killed. So this time it didn't happen, and Darrell made sure of that.
So when you play live, do you try to mix it up a little bit, just to try to tweak something, just to make it a little bit different in a live setting?
Well, it's I never play the songs the same way. The solos are always improvised. So
Love
so the
it.
solos are never the same.
Well, you're
Uh,
playing a lot of gigs, and I'm glad, in this post-pandemic world, that you're playing a lot of gigs now. And folks, check out, here, I'll throw it up there again specifically. Just go to stevehillmusic.com. Check out where he's playing. But it's all Canadian dates right now.
yeah.
When you're coming down here to the States, and may I remind you, we here in Phoenix, we have a lot of Canadian expatriates, or the snowbirds, who are here, and we love hot sauce, especially here since we're so close to Mexico.
Well, I need an agent. I'm looking for an agent in the States right now, so I can tour the States. We're working on that. There's been a few people interested. We've been talking to a few agents over there, and I think it'll happen in 2025, if not 2026. But I can't wait to tour the States. Been
Well,
waiting, been
we have
waiting a long time for that.
one of our past guests on the show, a promoter extraordinaire down here, Dan Zalesko. So I'll be sure to send this episode over to his assistant
That's awesome.
to them, and get you playing celebrity theater or someplace, one of Danny's many booking places down here. But I would love to see this stuff live. And I know my youngest brother is a blues player, a great guitar player, and so he's in Toledo. So I think he can at least skip over to Toronto, or I forgot to look and see if they have any Hamilton dates. So he could just bip right over the bridge there for you.
Okay.
If he has his passport these days. It's not like when I was growing up, we just cross over. What's your business in Canada? I'm legal in your country, sir. I'm here to get rip roaring drunk. Please don't drive drunk, sir.
No, I don't think it's a problem to cross over. You just go see a concert. I
Yeah,
do that.
nothing
I
wrong
do
with
that
that.
in the States. I
And
never have a
actually, and
problem.
before I let you go, Steve, I do want to talk about the videos that you're making to help promote Hanging on a String, and especially I love the song "Devil's Handyman," because your voice is just bleeding sinister on that one. And in the video, you just see that awesome glint in your eye as you take the role of the character. What's it like making videos?
It can be a pain in the ass, and it can be fun. For this one, for Devil's Handyman, it was really easy because the footage that you see of me playing, that's the actual footage from the recording. That's the take that you hear on the album, because the whole thing was filmed I had two guys there filming the whole recording, and then I went back to LA in September to film the. There's another video that I've put out, hanging on a string, where there's animation shots, but there's also shots of me playing with the wall of amps in the back.
Yep.
That's at 606. That's Dave Grohl's amps and the Foo's amps that I used for that, and we filmed that. Thing that you mentioned where I'm just singing the song. But Devil's Handyman was that's another one where it's just two takes. So I did two takes that were filmed, and it took about half an hour, and the rest of it is the footage from when I recorded the album. So that was my favorite video to film.
Love that. And Jim, before we let Steve go, anything else as a drummer or just a music guy?
Yeah, and I'm not overly familiar with the blues scene up in the Great White North. I mean, what's the kind of the reception you get up there for blues as opposed to the enthusiasm level down here? Is it about equal, or are there kind of some cultural differences that you're finding?
Well, like I've toured in Europe a lot. Also, I've toured in the UK. I've toured every country in Europe, and people are the same everywhere. They just want to be entertained. They want to hear good music, and blues or rock and roll. There's a crowd for that everywhere in the world, I think. At least everywhere in North America and Europe. And people just want to be entertained, man. And as far as the blues scene in Canada, well, Canada's a big country, so from one province to another, it's different. In my home province of Quebec, I do theater gigs, and I don't do the blues clubs anymore. There's not that many blues clubs left. I do bars mostly, like in Western Canada. I'm going to Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia in March, and these will all be bars. But like in Quebec, I do theaters. So it's all different, from one province to another. And like I said, it's a big country, so most acts stick. Like usually, like if you're based in Western Canada, you usually tour Western Canada mostly. If you're based in Ontario, you usually tour Ontario mostly. I used to do cross-country tours, not that much anymore because it's a lot of driving. So these days I mostly stick to Quebec and sometimes an Ontario gig, like Toronto or Ottawa, and then I fly out west. I got a road manager who lives in Calgary, and I got a drum kit there. I got amps there, and so that's the way to do it for me now. But we used to cross the country twice a year, and I'm not touring in a tour bus. I'm touring in a Dutch Grand Caravan. So it's hard. It's a hard life if you have to cross the country all the time.
And I need to make a correction. I got my Canadian geography messed up. My brother will be crossing the border into Windsor, not Hamilton.
Windsor, Ontario. I have nothing planned in Windsor.
Oh, well. Maybe I can have him drive a little bit further into Toronto or head
I'm playing in Toronto in April. So.
Okay, I'll let him know that because Big Sugar was one of his favorite bands back in the 90s.
Oh, Gordy's a killer. Gordy's a master. I'm a huge fan of Gordy Johnson and everything he's done. He's done a bunch of projects after Big Sugar, and now he's back fronting Big Sugar. It's a different version of Big Sugar, but it's still Gordy, and he's the loudest guitar player there is, and a great producer. I love the sound of his records.
Tell you what, I'll time it up depending on what my baseball commitments are here. I will make a trip back in April. My brother and I will drive up, and hopefully I can time it up to catch Mo Berg in The Pursuit of Happiness as well, because they're one of my favorites.
Okay.
I got to get you guys down here, but I understand it's a big travel down to Arizona. I get it. And I do want to close with again, fittingly so, When the Music's Over, because I love that it's one of my favorite Doors songs. I think it's just perfect with the album. And folks, I do want to encourage everybody, make sure you go to stevehillmusic.com, pick up Hanging on a String. It's on the No Label Records, Steve's self-label, and check it out. But, you know, it couldn't have ended any better with Feast of Friends, Alive She Cried. Thank you so much for doing that one. That love the Doors. Excellent job kicking on, closing the album with that one.
Thank you so much.
And be sure to catch Steve touring across Canada. We'll hopefully get him. We'll nudge him down here to Arizona to talk to some people down here for you.
You can also check out my YouTube channel. There's a bunch of music videos there, but also I got a podcast about gear. If you're into guitar gear, I have a show called Gear Talk. There's 16 episodes already, and I'm going to film some more in the coming months. And I talk about guitars, amps, guitar pedals, studio stuff, all of that stuff.
I'm a bar chord only guy after 30 years on these silly guitars, but I'll put my brother. I'll put him on that one for sure. But yeah, awesome. Check out YouTube, Facebook, all the socials, X, Instagram. Steve Hill, thank you so much for joining us here on All Over the Place.
Thanks, guys.
Absolute pleasure. Cheers.
Cheers.
And thanks, everybody.
I got maple syrup in my coffee.
I've got whiskey because, as I said to Jim right before you got here, I'm on with a Canadian. I got to up my liquor game. So cheers to you, my friend. Love the album. Check it out. Hanging on a String. Play it back and forth with Black Crowes. Great times. Steve Hill, thanks again for joining us here on All Over the Place.
Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to you. See you in April.
All Over the Place, where the fun sanity never ends.